We now turn to our main story, which is a game I made up in middle school. At the beginning of this game, you can choose between Image Comics characters Shadowhawk and Spawn, but you can also play two-player co-op if you have a friend who shares your interests. It's important to note here that Spawn has lost most of his powers, so they are pretty much matched in terms of stats. Spawn is slow and strong and has his axe from Soul Calibur 2, and Shadowhawk is quick and agile and uses his claws. Anyway, this game is a time travel game. An opening story sequence kind of shows Spawn and Shadowhawk running into each other while they're both investigating a series of occult murderers. The Violator shows up then and pushes them into a magic portal. Later it becomes apparent that the Violator isn't actually the one behind the murderers. I might as well tell you, it's the Freak. The Freak is working together with Hawk's Shadow, but that doesn't really matter until much later in the game. The Violator just pushes them into the portal for now. The two heroes are transported back to a small New England frontier town during the late 1600s era, leading up to the, you guessed it, Salem witch trials. So things are getting hinky. It should also be noticed that Spawn doesn't have his cape at this time. It's not his big red cape is gone. That's not an issue. So anyway, this is a game I made up. The two heroes in this town in the 1600s. The town is also called Gloomsbrook, and the game is sort of a top-down action RPG, like with big sprites, like Beyond Oasis. It's something like that. The characters are 2D sprites, but the levels themselves are 3D, so actually it kind of looks like Dark Savior or those remakes of old Dragon Quest games for the DS, so you can kind of rotate the levels and find hidden doors and things. I think that style ages really well. Anyway, Spawn and Shadowhawk have to wander around in colonial New England in the 1600s and try to figure out what's going on. And the basic premise is that the Violator and the Vindicator and several other of Malbosia's lieutenants have been kidnapping villains from the modern Image universe and putting them into portals that send them back to the 1600s. Spawn and Shadowhawk first have to gain the trust of the people of Gloomsbrook, who are obviously very shocked at their appearance. And the first thing that happens in Gloomsbrook is that you meet a weird old man named Zadok. And Zadok says, "I've been waiting for you. I have been having dreams about the arrival of two heroes who will rip the stinking curse out from this dying town. I can't say I like the look of you, but my dreams are never wrong." And then Spawn says, "What the hell is going on, old man? How do we get back to New York? Is this some kind of a trick? There's a murderer on the loose." And then Shadowhawk says, "I don't think we're going back to New York anytime soon." And that's when Zadok says, "Have faith that you'll find the answers you'll need eventually, but I first need you to do something for me. Many years ago, I had a wife, and even back then, she was much younger than me, and I did not want to marry her because she was known to be a wild heart, prone to fits of anger and mischief. Her mother and father were eager to be rid of her. They offered me 3 cows, which during the harder years of settlement was a great temptation, so we were married in the church. Shortly after, we traveled some distance from the town. We needed more land for the cattle, and the king's men were not eager to sell us any nearby plots on account of my wife's reputation among the upper-class landowners. So we took our belongings and our livestock and we went into the woods. We found a good place for us with ample grazing and lumber to make our house, and for a while there was some peace. My wife even seemed content for a time, but then there came the dead winter, and we were cut off from the colony. The cows died. We were starving, cold, and fearful. My wife stopped sleeping. She told me that if she did sleep, she would never wake up. She would just stare out at the snow-covered forest and whisper at it. And though I tried to keep watch over her, I was unable to stay awake like she could. One morning, I woke to see the door of our cottage left open, and from the open door, a nearly covered track of footsteps to the line of trees. I searched for her for days. I cannot say that we ever loved each other, but we kept each other safe, and I didn't want to live alone." Spawn says okay, and then Shadowhawk says okay, and then Zadok says, "I failed. When the spring finally came and the snow melted, I assumed I would find her body and give her a proper Christian burial. But even then, there was no sign. I went along with my life, venturing into the village occasionally, and people were kind to me. Her parents even gave me a cow and several sheep to make up for the livestock I had lost. But I resented them because they had wanted her to be gone, and in her absence, they had theirs, and I had no one." And then Spawn says, "I'm sorry for your loss, but I think we should be starting to figure out how to get back to New York." And then Zadok says, "No, please let me finish." It was in the summer that she came back. I woke up in the middle of the night after having terrible dreams, and that is when I heard her singing at the edge of the trees. I rushed to the window, believing that I was still asleep, but there she was in the moonlight. I called to her and beckoned. There was something wrong, something dead and evil in her eyes, a cruelty. She smiled widely, and I could see that her teeth were rotten and green, and she began to laugh and call my name. Zadok! Zadok! Come out, man, and meet your wife!" and that's when the wolves started howling. I really can't stress this enough. This is a game that doesn't exist. It's just a game that I made up when I was a teenager. I spent the rest of that night with my sword and gun at the ready, pacing like a prisoner. When I could hear the wolves attacking my animals, I covered my ears and cowered until sunrise. When morning came, I set the homestead to fire. It didn't matter. Nothing would ever grow or thrive there again for years. I lived in the gutters of Gloomsbrook, doing odd work for table scraps. The people here saw me as a harbinger of bad fortune, but were decent enough, I suppose, to not let me simply die in the streets. But when I started to dream of holes in the universe and a house made of bones in the woods, I knew something was wrong. And then I started to hear singing, her singing, and the howls of wolves nearer, closer. Evil is coming. If something isn't done soon, this town. I have no love for the people here, but I am still a man who fears God and doesn't wish that death should come to them. I am too old and too weak, but you can do it. Go into the woods, find the creature who was my wife, and destroy it. And once you do the thing, meet me at the church in Gloomsbrook. And then Spawn says, I guess we'll do that. So that's how your first quest is set up, and like most first quests, it teaches you the basics of combat, exploration, and inventory management. There's also a robust upgrade system, but I'll have to talk about that at a later time.